Okay, our first speaker is ready. His name is Michael Siebert, Mike, alias Mike, and he will introduce himself as he starts speaking. Welcome to the floor.
Good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Michael. I'm a physiotherapist. I work at Mnguzi Hospital at the moment. I completed my community service there last year, and I've spent the last 6 months working with an NPO. And today I'll be telling you about that NPO. I'll be presenting From Zero to Hero, the development of a peer support service in rural South Africa. So what is a peer supporter? Basically put, it is the psychosocial support for people with disabilities and their caregivers by people with disabilities and their caregivers. It's a peer mentoring or support by similar people, and it's basically the formalization of sharing of life experiences. I have been there, I can empathize with you, and it comes in the form of volunteer work, paid work, or simply just a friend supporting or checking up on a friend. So what are some of the roles of a peer supporter? Psychosocial support. I've been there, I can empathize, they can better understand. They provide hope, role modeling, and the possibilities of the return to function. They provide community insight. They have navigated this community and the barriers and environmental barriers that are present here, and they've overcome them, and they can share those experiences with other wheelchair users. They provide social insight, reintegration into your family and acceptance of the family. They provide practical advice and education, such as secondary complications, wheelchair skills, transfers, basic ADLs. They have a big role in networking, so inclusion, creating a community of people with disabilities and the sharing of opportunities. And they also have a role in advocacy and disability awareness. So, history of our Mnguzi peer support. In 2013, 2 of our therapists started the program, and it commenced with 1 volunteer. His name is Moses. He's currently our chairperson, and it was on a volunteer basis, so there was no payment for his work done. But in 2017, finally, the Diaconal Ministry of the PK and Churches came on board and provided an hourly stipend for him and then another parent facilitator from another NPO. And the NPO was finally formalized in 2019 when the Rachel Swart Fund came on board and provided hourly stipends for the 7 official members, which are now part of the NPO. And the members were selected by one of our community occupational therapists who was very deeply rooted in the disability network. And they were selected based on criteria of community participation, inclusion, integration. Would they be a suitable role model for other wheelchair users? And also their responsibility towards their own self-management and self-care. Also in 2019, the Mnguzi Therapy Department developed a modified outcome measure, SA outcome measure, based on the PHQ-4 and the satisfaction with life survey. So after that, we've been growing from strength to strength. All of the peer supporters attended a 5-day peer group training session hosted by Rehabilitation in Cape Town, and included aspects of disability rights, bladder and bowel function, sexuality, relationships, healthy lifestyle and exercise, transfers, assist devices, and communication. And after that, a lot of the training occurred on the job, when going out with therapists, when having monthly case discussions, allowing space for therapists to provide input, and also the sharing of ideas amongst themselves and peer supporters from other districts. 2 of our peer supporters also double up as wheelchair repairers for the Mnguzi department, and this was achieved through a service level agreement between Disabled People South Africa and the Department of Health. In 2020, we also had an all-terrain vehicle that was donated by the Rachel Swart Foundation, and the Quad Para Association fitted it with a hand control unit, so our wheelchair users are able to drive this independently. And then in 2020, another Mnguzi NPO, the Mnguzi Skills Development Initiative, also procured funding to sustain a Nissan hardbody, which provided another form of transportation. And then at the start of this year, Open Society funding provided COVID funding in response to the COVID pandemic to allow a contracted therapist, myself, to work with the NPO for the next 6 months. I love this photo. It's just a very happy photo of our peer supporters, and that is the ATV that the Rachel Swart Foundation donated that was fitted with the hand control unit. So what are some of the services that our peer supporters offer? Firstly, they have a big role in education. A lot of their education is based on their own lived experiences, as well as the training they have received. And a lot of it is to do, from what I've experienced, financial management, secondary complications, and more recently with the vaccine. You can go to the next slide. The peer supporters were vaccinated within the first phase of the vaccine rollout, and this put them in such a great position to provide information and encouragement to other people with disabilities in the community. And there was also an in-service that was done by Kate Cherry. And after that, the response and the beliefs and stigmas that were broken down in our wheelchair users was amazing. And after every home visit, the peer supporters say he'll go for the vaccine tomorrow. So it's that buy-in that a wheelchair user, someone who's had the vaccine and they are okay, and they have provided me with accurate information, that buy-in is so much better. Go to the next slide. They also provide wheelchair skills. I mean, in Manguzi, if you can go to the next slide, you can see the terrain. It's sandy, it's rough, there's rocks. These wheelchair users have overcome this. They've learned to navigate through it, and they can help new wheelchair users and also existing wheelchair users who are upgrading their level of function with taxi transfers, car transfers, wheelchair skills required to perform basic everyday ADLs. They play a big role in our seating clinics. You can go to the next slide. So we have outreach seating clinics to patients' homesteads as well as to clinics. And the two wheelchair repairers often come with. And this is a great opportunity where dual services are provided to clients, where they are seated correctly by the therapist accompanying them. Wheelchairs are serviced and maintained, but also it's an opportunity for peer counseling and support by the peer supporters to the actual wheelchair users, as well as the caregivers that often accompany them. And personally, one of the greatest things that the peer supporters offer is the early warning system and a manner in which to refer patients. They fill that gap between the community and the health services. So they service a client base of 40 people that they manage independently. 29 of them still receive active interventions, so they're visited on a monthly basis, and the others are checked up on telephonically. But if there is an issue in the clients that live in the middle of nowhere, 100 Ks from clinic, from hospital, their first source of contact is the peer supporter. The peer supporter then comes to the therapy department, and we can then liaise with our systems and our transport. How are we going to solve this? How are we going to solve this issue and prevent it from escalating? They also have a role in advising therapists and families and wheelchair users on home adaptations and accessibility issues. And it was amazing for me as a conserve to see a wheelchair user building a ramp. I started doing it, and Lucy said no, and he took the shovel and took over. And he built a beautiful ramp. And I mean, yeah, I didn't even need to go on that home, so I felt like a spare wheel. Networking, we have such a vast network of people with disabilities and wheelchair users in Manguzi, which is spearheaded by the peer supporters. There's also a WhatsApp group which includes peer supporters and people with disabilities from the surrounding districts, and it just creates this sense of community, and it allows the sharing of accurate information as well as opportunities. And our peer supporters have a big role in advocacy and education, as I mentioned. So a few weeks ago, we went to the tribal committee, to the tribal council, and one of the peer supporters had a talk to the 14 indunas of each area, and it was amazing to see how the indunas interacted with him, the questions they asked, the comments they made. They asked, how can they help? How can we assist? And it was a great start to our relationship with the tribal authority. And we were subsequently invited to attend 2 community meetings. And this is one of the peer supporters speaking at one of the community meetings. And the Nduna of the area invited people with disabilities and their caregivers to be a part of this meeting. And relevant issues were discussed and addressed. Ofany has provided a story of his injury and some of the challenges that he experiences. And a lot of them were around transport, specifically in this area. And then in the past 6 months, they've been a great asset in collecting baseline data for a lot of our clients, administering this outcome measure, and the way patients are a lot more vulnerable to them, and their information is a lot better received from the peer supporters. And we did some training with him to be able to administer it. So in 6 months, 12 months time, we can go and re-administer it and see what are the outcomes of this peer support service. And lastly, they're also a great asset in teaching new therapists, because we have a high turnover of community therapists on a yearly basis, and to sensitize them and to teach them and assist them and to show them what is it like to actually live with a spinal cord injury in this community. So in the past 6 months, this is with the addition of a therapist who is providing technical support and governance and mainly just solve their transport issue. These are just some of the stats that they came. So we serviced 44 clients. This is a peer supporter and a therapist, and it doesn't take into account the sessions that the peer supporter did without the therapist, which they do. So these are just the ones that I kept track of. We serviced 44 clients, 113 client interactions. 10 of them we had to refer to a medical doctor, 7 had to be referred to the therapy department. We did 49 sessions related to assistive devices, so the fixing of wheelchairs, seating reviews, reseatings, etc. 20 were active rehabilitation by either the therapist or the peer supporter. 15 were predominantly counseling, but most of these 113 interactions included counseling support, motivation, encouragement, but those 15 were predominantly counseling. 13 financial management and support, 9 home adaptations were done, 9 of them were predominantly wheelchair training, and we did 5 school visits for 2 of our clients. So what are some of our challenges? As I've mentioned, one is transport. The patients live far apart. Transport doesn't take you there, it drops you on the dirt road, and then you have to push through the sand to get to your client. It makes them very largely dependent on therapy for transport, and it allows them not to be able to go visit their patients when they need to. So what are some of the solutions? Rachel Swart has donated an ATV, which is fitted with a hand control unit. An independent donor has provided funding so we can roadworthy it and make it more user-friendly. And Driving Ambitions from the Quad Para Association are actually coming next week to equip the therapists with skills to seat the peer supporters and the varying disabilities in the ATV as well as in a normal vehicle. And they're also equipping our nearest driving school to train and test people with disabilities to drive so they can be licensed, and we have one step closer to solving this issue. And we also have an ATV and quad bike and off-road motorbike specialist coming to do a 4-day training course just with recovery, maintenance, and looking after the ATV as well as off-road driving. And then obviously the acquiring of the Nissan hard body allowed the previous 6 months to occur. So these are the guys learning how to drive. A lot of it is very scary at first because a lot of them have no driving experience originally. So I fear for my life. Next slide. Sustainable source of funding. So currently they are funded by the Rachel Swart Foundation on an hourly stipend. But as the transport issues get solved and the governance improves, their working hours improve, they see more clients, the peer support service may even expand, and so more funding is needed and on a sustainable basis. And at the moment, we are on a 12-month contract pending review and renewal at the end of it. But there's also a constant need for training and top up, which always requires more funding. So we're in the process of registering as a PBO, which allows more wide of a range and greater amounts of funding, and we could possibly start looking at getting corporate funding. But we also want to try to draw up an MOU with the hospital and the district to possibly get a service level agreement to employ them as CBR workers, same as with the wheelchair guides. But in the long run, we need to create standardized and internationally recognized peer support training material, which would then lead to the creation of a regulatory body, and then we could officially employ them as mid-level rehab workers. And Jacques-Claude is working on this training material, but I think that is a prospect for the future. So for now, we're looking at drawing up this MOU and pushing for a service level agreement. NPO governance is another issue. At the startup, the therapist did a lot of the admin, the invoicing, the donor liaising, the scheduling, the fund sourcing. So some of the solutions is the contracted therapist, which is myself in the past 6 months, to provide assistance and training when you want to get the guys a laptop, get them proficient on Word, Microsoft, and we're also merging with one of our adjacent NPOs who have very complementary skills, and we have the financial management aspect, they have the literacy aspect. If we put them together, I think we can do great things, but there will always be some sort of a technical support required by the therapy department. But at the moment, we're looking at reducing that and getting the NPO as independent as possible. And then effective integration with the hospital, it has gotten a lot better over the past few months, but there still is a need for shared information regarding cases and case discussions and be once a month meetings with the peer supporters in the morning meeting with the therapy department could solve that, as well as effective meet and greets, which often do happen but haven't happened recently due to COVID. So yeah, sorry, that was a very quick rundown of our peer support service, but in conclusion, I just want to say peer supporters, in terms of health equity, they bridge that gap between the community and the health services and the access to consumables, to medication, to prevention of secondary complications and emergency situations for this vulnerable population. The peer supporters are a great addition to the therapy team to bridge that gap between the two services. Thank you very much. On time.
Okay, Mike, this was a brilliant presentation, and I'm enticed by the spirit and the motivation which comes over through the slides. I want to ask for questions or comments also from online, and I need help to see the online hands. He has made it in time, so you can ask a question. The question was, will you be staying on the area?
So more funding has been secured through the Rachel Swart Foundation to keep me on for another 12 months, which is amazing. At the moment, we're just trying to find a vessel in which to direct the money to me because they don't hire therapists. So yes. So the question was, just for those online, I've had a very unique experience after my community service and privileged to stay on. How am I going to share this experience and information that I've learned with my peers? So we have been looking at varying ways of doing that, and that's why I mentioned the vessel for the money is possibly the starting of a NPC, which would allow a way for that money to reach us without our donors hiring therapists, but also create a platform for us to create a website with webinars and workshops and places to communicate for young professionals who want to stay in rural. I mean, I know a lot of my friends and colleagues that I graduated with would have loved to have stayed, but there was just no post for them. So, I mean, it's only been 6 months for me, but that, if I had to give you a long-term plan, it would be something like the establishment of an NPC with a website, social media platforms, which allows for networking and sharing of information and knowledge through workshops, webinars.
I think there are big dreams, and they should not go to waste. Michael, please. There's a hand. Okay. You can unmute yourself. Who wants to speak? Cameroon, please come on.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And Mike, I must congratulate you on an excellent presentation. It's so encouraging to see the work that you've been involved in and the work that's been done out there. And I think specifically creating an opportunity for people with disability to engage in meaningful, productive activity. I think that's really, really encouraging, and yeah, great work. My question is around one arm of the service, and probably because I think in 2014, this gave me many sleepless nights. But I'm wondering about your sense of, you spoke about the peer supporters in the acute hospital setting providing counseling services. And I'm wondering what your sense is of how well patients with spinal cord injuries have engaged with that, and how well that counseling service has worked, and whether you think that's translated into a prevention of secondary complications.
Thanks, Cam. So since I've been at Manguzi in the past 18 months, we have seen quite a few new spinal cord injury patients. I mean, I think 2 have been admitted to the ward and then discharged home in the time that I've been there. And the peer supporters have spent an immense amount of time with these patients. I mean, we even had a meeting a while ago where they said they need to regulate the amount of time that they come and visit them. And we have had a lot of success, and because those relationships built in the ward are so much stronger than patients who transfer in from other hospitals and don't spend time in the ward. And especially because if they're in the hospital, they're so close, they're so easily accessible for the peer supporters. There's a lot of time to build that relationship and that counseling, and which leads, when they get discharged, they get followed up so much more regularly, even more than on just a patient or client basis. They check up on their friends or on someone in the community who's in a similar condition to them. So in my experience, which is very limited compared to, I mean, yours and Marek's and everyone else's, it has really led to better checking up on, better knowledge of how the patients are doing at home, and better access of our services for that patient due to the increase in communication and connection levels formed in the acute care in the ward.
Thanks, Mike. I think that's a good answer, and I think you made a good case through your presentation for the value of kind of social learning and leveraging that in this environment. And I hope, judging by your answer, that you get a couple more hours sleep than I did for a short period of time. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for the discussion and questions. I think we can still contact him further on more information.